Guys, it's Manga time once again. I'm here today to bring you my review of Bleach 648, The Theatre Suicide Scene 2. And yeah, this is the chapter we've been waiting for a long time. Actually seeing what Shunsui's Bankai does. And to say it's been divisive among the community is an understatement. Obviously when we get there, I will give my thoughts about how I feel about Shunsui's Bankai. Because it's a weird one. It's a weird one. But before we move on though, guys, I just want to say thanks to everyone once again who has been subscribing to my vlog channel. That's awesome of you, and I really appreciate the support. If you haven't subscribed, then please do. Yeah, that'd be really great. But now, on to the review. We start off with Askin, which is great because I didn't expect to see him for a while. But seriously, Askin just continues to prove why he's such a great character and is awesome. So he's kind of like sneakily watching Ichigo, and Ichigo's darting through the Varvelt, and then he suddenly runs into Askin, who appears to be like hanging off of this lamp post, I presume, singing in the rain style. Seriously, he is just so eccentric, but it's great because he's got so much character and so much personality. But yeah, he's like hanging off this pole like that, and Ichigo's, he's like, you're the guy from earlier. What happened to Grimmjow? And immediately Ichigo's going for his Zanketsu. So Ichigo's clearly very much on the alert at this point. Askin is like, oh, who's Grimmjow? Oh yeah, that raving lunatic with the dodgy haircut. He's taking a little nap over there. So Grimmjow has actually lost. That's hilariously funny. Like, I'm sorry if you're a Grimmjow fan, but he was brought back just to get one shot by Askin. I do personally think that Grimmjow's going to come back probably during this fight, and we could get the tag team between Ichigo and Grimmjow that, frankly, we've been waiting to see for ages now. I definitely could see that happening. But yeah, Askin's like, oh yeah, he's taking a nap over there. Or wait, was it over there? These streets are like really confusing to me. And Ichigo's like, wait, so you defeated Grimmjow? And Askin gives him a bit of a wry smile, and he's like, why does everything have to be about winning or losing? I've always had an aversion to these sorts of things. And Ichigo gets like pissed off. He's like, I didn't ask what you do or don't like, just answer the question. And this is the first time Ichigo's really, not the first time necessarily, but it's rare for Ichigo to be so blunt, especially like towards his enemies. He's not always like, just tell me what I need to know rather than beating around the bush. And Askin's like, not with that kind of tone. I will tell you my name, however. I'm Askin Naknavar. And Ichigo, Knuckleval, according to Manga Stream, because they've butchered his name twice now. But anyway, Ichigo jumps towards him and he unsheaths his sword. Askin's just sort of standing there with his hand on his hip, like, which is rather interesting, because rather than running away like he did against Grimmjow, he appears to be ready to take Ichigo head on, which is quite interesting. But as Ichigo's on the way towards him, there's suddenly they are literally swamped by this huge wave of black Reiatsu. Whether it's actually a wave of black Reiatsu or if that's just the area suddenly going dark, I don't know, but it's hard to say. But they're both obviously very shocked by this, and it interrupts their fight momentarily. We then get to see kind of reactions from across the Varvelt, and Ganju's like, out of the blue, it's really, really dark, and it's freezing cold. But Chad says, it hasn't gotten, the temperature hasn't dropped and it hasn't really gotten any darker. This sensation is simply the same as when someone gets the chills. And Orihime says, the chills are literally coursing through her whole body. So this Reiatsu is horrifying, it's solemn, it's mournful, it's depressing is mainly the main thing. It's a depressing Reiatsu that's literally just crushing everyone, and they're feeling this like horrible sensation. And honestly, that's so cool. I love that aspect. It's very, very similar to Yamamoto's Bankai being released, when all of society felt the heat from Zanka no Tachi. This is the same deal. Everything is now coated in darkness, and everyone's freezing, and everything's depressing, and it's just really cool. It's a brilliant setup for his Bankai. And Ichigo's like, it can't be Kyoraku-san, because this is so menacingly evil. Anyway, we then see Lille Barro, and he lands on this building, and the bottom half of his Volsendig unravels, revealing some very fucking weird legs. Very weird legs. I don't know what is going on with this character design anymore. He is very, very weird looking. As simple as that. And one of my issues with these Quincy Volsendigs, well, not all of them, but some of them, like this one, is that because they are just supposed to be light, it's just like Reiatsu light. There's no texture on any of them, so they look very, very flat. I'm hoping they look a bit better in the actual Tankobon releases, but anyway, yeah. So Lille's kind of like, an illusion. It appears that the sky has turned to darkness, and then Shunsui shows up, and there's no change. That's the first thing we immediately pick up on. There is no change. Katen Kyokotsu looks the same as it does in Shikai, which is undeniably disappointing. Even though Katen Kyokotsu is like the coolest looking Shikai in a long way, I do like it when the Bankai looks different. But anyway, Shunsui appears, and there's definitely a weird trail of something behind him, but I don't know if that's actually relevant or not, or if it's just an aesthetic to show he's shumpoed into the area. But, you know, Lille's like, you done running, and Shunsui's like, oh, it was rude of me to keep you waiting, but do you mind giving me some feedback? And he says, you know, at this moment, how does the world appear to you? Is it perhaps a gloomy, destitute place full of melancholy and despair? And Lille's like, oh, right, so this is your ability, is it? You know, you've made it horrible around here. This is you know, all very dark and murky, but, you know, to say melancholy and despair, that's a bit of exaggeration. Lille then appears above Shunsui, and I actually really like this panel. It's super dynamic, and it actually really conveys Lille as angelic. Kubo, for all his artistic brilliance, seriously sucks at drawing wings. Like, I don't know why, but every time a character has wings in this series, they look awful. Well, not every time. Let me rephrase that. Every time they have angelic wings. So I'm talking Aizen, Lille, basically most of the other Volsundigs. Look, their wings look awful. Kurge, wings like Hitsugaya's Bankai, they look freaking cool. They're drawn really well. But I don't know what it is about the way Kubo draws wings. They're just really, really flat. They have no dimension to them whatsoever. I'm really hoping one of the Quincy, I'm thinking maybe Hashwolf, has actual feathered wings, like proper feathery angel wings, because then we actually might have some substance, and they look cool. But anyway, I'm digressing. Lille appears above Shunsui with all of his wings outwards, and they're like glowing, and honestly, it's a really cool picture. And he says, you know, a messenger of God feels no such emotions as melancholy and despair. So at this point, he considers himself, you know, Yahava's messenger. He's a messenger of God, and his attack fucking destroys an entire segment of one of the islands. And, you know, he barely broke a sweat. But he says, you know, although we were unable to gather the intel on your Bankai, you know, there is one truth that has become clearly evident. If the owner of the katana dies, the Bankai will simply vanish. That's also interesting. Does that imply that Yamamoto's Zankan Otachi is gone? Because it certainly it wasn't the same for Sasakibe, his Kokogoryu Rikyu. That was funny to say. His Kokogoryu Rikyu was still around, so that don't make any sense. But either way, Lille suddenly notices that his side has got a massive hole blown in it, and he's like, well, what the hell's going on? And this is when we finally get to see some of the abilities of Katen Kyokotsu Kuromatsu Shinyu. First Dan, I'm going off Manga Stream's translation because frankly it was a lot better this week than Manga Panda. First Dan, hesitating sharing of the wound. Other translations have used first level, but yeah. Basically, Shunsui's first Bankai ability is that any wounds inflicted on your opponent's body will emerge on your own body as well. So presumably that means if Shunsui hurts Lille, he will get hurt as well at some point. Unless there's like a cutoff. So say it might be if the wounds were delivered before the Bankai was activated. Who knows? We don't know. Because then Lille gets a whole blast in his shoulder as well, just like Shunsui did. So yeah, Lille's taken some pretty nasty damage now. Shunsui's like, I regret to inform you that you will not be able to die from said wounds, which is nice because that thing he said last week about, oh, you know, I wish I could just die from these. You know, it's nice because that's quite a little bit of foreshadowing there. But anyway, Lille's like, you know, what's the meaning of this? Answer me. And Shunsui's like, you know, I told you, it's my Bankai. And he then says the name of his Bankai again. For some reason, it's now Karamatsu Shinju. I don't know if that's a translation change, but he holds his swords up, one down, and you get the awesome aesthetic of the black pine tree behind him again, looking very cool. And he says, you know, you've been rather talkative throughout this little exposition, but as we move on to the main act, you'll hold your tongue. Now then, second Dan. And this is when things start to get weird. Bed of shame. Lille is suddenly covered in, like, black spots. Very similar to the Black Death, the Black Plague. And apparently it's all part of a story. Shunsui says the man shamed by the wounds inflicted on him by his opponent, overcome with that shame, lies himself down cowering in his bed and is stricken with an incurable disease. So Lille is now covered in this disease, and he starts bleeding from his eyes and his nose and everything. And then we move on to the third Dan, and I will get into, because this is the end of the chapter now, so I will get into my thoughts on the Bankai. They are suddenly plunged underwater in what is known as Dangyo's abyss. And at this point, Lille is literally like, what the fuck is going on? This is crazy. And Shunsui says those that have resolved themselves cast their bodies into the water gushing forth until both their Reiatsu completely expire. And that's the end of the chapter, so that is cool. But I'm going to break down my thoughts of the Bankai now. My initial impressions, I was disappointed. Initially, when I read Manga Panda, I was thinking to myself, what is this? These appear to be three, frankly, random abilities that have come out of nowhere. What can they, like, there was no connection to the mysterious shadowy woman of last chapter. There was no real connection to the pine trees either. So I was kind of like, this is random and I don't really like it, because, this is, I don't see what it has to do with anything. But then you start to look into it a bit more, and things actually get quite cool. And then Manga Stream did things very well, actually, as well. So it appears that Shunsui's Bankai is taking inspiration from plays. And they are suicide plays, I think. So it's all to do with suicide. His whole Bankai has to do with depression and suicide, which is really fucking dark. And it all kind of highlights Shunsui's bipolar nature, which, I've been saying for ages now. The character is a complete character of two different sides. He, on the one hand, he's this happy-go-lucky captain who's like, oh, let's all have a drink, yeah, blah, blah, blah. But there is that side of him that is, his face is often covered in shadow, and he's super sinister, and everything's dark and evil. And, he's like fighting evil with evil, and when everyone's in a fight, you're always evil. And he's just like, he's very, very, very dark. And he's so awesome, like, seriously, he's so awesome. But yeah, so his first stage, his first play, the opponent gets inflicted with the same wounds. And then after that, you feel, and I think the first, I think I read somewhere the first part of his Bankai is representative of hesitation. Because I guess it's to do with you being hurt. And then the second part of the Bankai, which is the disease, which seems very overpowered, although it's hard to tell quite how it's affecting Lille at the moment. Obviously he's bleeding a lot, but we don't know if it's actually like really hurting him or what. But yeah, that Bankai seems to come from, the disease seems to come is a form of shame, because the man who was injured has just gone and hidden away, and now he's contracted a disease. So yeah, again, these are all very dark emotions, and then finally they're thrust underwater in what is essentially the end. Now we will basically see who lasts the longest. I think that's what it is anyway. Although Manga Stream seems to imply they're both going to die, so again, that could be the double suicide. I didn't expect them to go underwater. That's a strange visual image. Like, I was expecting shadows and, the dark pine trees that we saw from last week. Underwater's not quite the image I was expecting, and it's a very weird to picture, because they should be flying, or whatever, so I don't know how they're underwater. But at the same time, I love the idea of this death match, like, we're both going to be underwater, and whoever's Reiatsu lasts the longest is going to survive. And I think that's really awesome. And that's kind of what I was expecting from his Bankai. I was expecting some kind of death game that would lock the two of them in it, and only the winner would escape alive. I was expecting that. And it looks like that might be what we're getting. Whether the fight's really going to continue underwater, or if it's just going to be a case of waiting it out and seeing who lasts the longest, I don't know. But I do like the Bankai. I love the imagery. I think the imagery is really, like, creepy and just sinister. But I hope we see more of the shadowy woman. I hope we see more of the black pines, because I love that whole idea. Just, his Bankai is not what I expected. I think that's where the main kind of, being taken aback comes from. It's nothing like I expected. It's really, really dark and really sinister. And it's just like, you experience these horrible emotions like fear and shame and depression leading to suicide, because that's essentially what the Dangyo Abyss is. And I believe it says on here something like the name Dangyo or something like that is to do with severed twin fish. And and I'm paraphrasing something I read here, but it means something along the lines of the area at the base of a waterfall where all the water collects. It's like a deep hole, and that's presumably where they are now, supposedly. But that's also possibly like a suicide spot, popular suicide spot in Japan or something like that. So this whole Bankai has very, very dark connotations, and I do like it a lot. I like it a lot, but it still feels random and disjointed to me. And I feel like the meaning is maybe slightly lost because we're not Japanese, or I'm not Japanese at least. And obviously we're going off a translation. I feel like it might be more poetic, and you might get the better sense of the different plays and how they all intertwine better if it was, you're reading it in the native tongue. I definitely think that would help. Because, it's very Shunsui to have a Bankai that'd be like that. So, yeah, it's very weird. And I've read this series long enough now to know not to judge a Bankai on the first chapter it's revealed. Because there have been so many instances where people have been like, that Bankai is really disappointing. And then in about 2 or 3 weeks, the Bankai is awesome. Because it's like, whoa, that's really cool. Because Kubo unveils new layers. I think the best example for me is Gin. Like when Gin was like, oh, my Bankai is 13 kilometers and he hit Ichigo, and I was like, you joking, that's terrible. And then later on he was like, oh, it's also really, really fast. Oh, and it's also really, really quick. And no, really, really long, I suppose the other one was. Oh, and it's also freaking poisonous. So then things start getting cooler. Yamamoto was another one. When he first did his Bankai, it was just the slightly burning sword, and it was like, really? And then it was, oh, this week there's this, and this week there's this, and I'm expecting that from Shunsui. I think we'll get more of the woman. I think we'll get more of the Black Pines, and I just hope we get more of that imagery because it was awesome. But that is it for this week's chapter, guys. Pretty crazy chapter this week. Do let me know in the comments below what you thought of Shunsui's Bankai. I'd be super interested to hear if you've got any theories or anything like that in regards to the Bankai and its imagery. I'm very hyped for Ichigo versus Askin. Ichigo doesn't generally kill his opponents, so Askin's probably going to survive this, I think. As I've been saying for ages. But yeah, that's it from me, guys. I'm going to give this week a 4.5 out of 5. I really liked it, but the hype is definitely dropping a little bit for the Bankai. We need to see more. I will hold off from saying I'm disappointed until I've seen it in its entirety. Because I do like what I've seen. Now I've finally got my head around it and I understand it a bit better, and I see the theatrics and the imagery. It's very cool, but it does still feel a bit random. I wish it had not been water at the end. I wish they had been like drowning in shadow or something. That would have fit so much better, I think. But, other than that, it's fine. I tell you a really kind of crazy-ass way I think this fight could end is if they're both staring each other down, and then suddenly the water just disappears. And Shinsui's like, what? There shouldn't be a winner yet. No one's lost all their Reiatsu. And then, boom, Nanao was caught in the Bankai and her Reiatsu was drained. I could totally see Kubo doing something like that, because she's supposed to be nearby. So, and the fact that Shunsui was like, I hope you don't get caught up with this, is almost guaranteed foreshadowing that she will get caught up in it at some point. So, I could definitely see that happening. But that's it for me this week, guys. As always, please do subscribe to my videos. I'd super appreciate the support. That'd be really great. Leave a comment and leave a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate that too. But until next time, guys, see you later.